Is there anyone here, since their childhood, can remember if they've ever experienced an unsafe situation with an adult or a family member? Try and remember anything. Look at that silence. If I had a survey after my talk, I guarantee that at least half of this room would admit to experiencing one incident with sexual abuse. Statistics show that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will have been sexually abused by their 18th birthday. Can you think of someone in your church, your village, your own family? There are 42 million survivors of sexual abuse, 3 times the amount of cancer survivors, yet you never hear the fight to cure this disease. Where are the bracelets? Where are the stickers behind the soccer mom vans for this awareness? Sexual abuse is a silent epidemic. The population of Samoa and American Samoa shows that 70% of the population is youth, 49 and under. Now, we live in a very hierarchical social structure where the older you are, the more power you have. So think about it. 30% have power over 70% of people in American Samoa. When I think about Samoan identity, 2 things come to mind: culture and religion. Both spaces, although felt safe, I still remember always trying not to be seen or heard when elders were around because it was a sign of disrespect. Being raised in San Francisco, California, the only place you got to see your family and Samoan community was at church. So culture and religion have always been a double-edged sword for me. As a young girl going to church, me and my girl cousins labeled one of the men Uncle Moikokolo, which means molester, pervert, broke it down, moi, sleep, kokolo, crawling. He was always trying to hug us a little bit too long, rub our back, pull our hair, or sometimes try to kiss us as if it accidentally kissed our lips. I remember trying to tell an adult. I finally stood up for myself. The adult just said, "Leave him alone. Why are you bothering him? You know he's drunk." We never really discussed it any further after. We just normalized it and played it as if it was a game. Who would get away from Uncle Moikokolo's traps? This wouldn't be my last incident. I was molested almost a decade of my life to the same person, and it only stopped because we changed churches. He only touched me when he came over our house and while my parents were around the back or my brothers were just around the corner. He knew how to make it seem safe. Almost felt like Uncle Moikokolo because I would find ways again to get away from him, and like a game, applauding myself for not getting touched. Again, I would never tell anyone. Statistics in Samoa and the US show that 90% of the time, victims know their abuser, either a family member or a close friend. 90% of the time, it gets unreported because of fear of no one believing them. One thing about our culture is that we are very prideful people, even to the point where we would never want to shame our family. I never told my parents because we never talked about anything that dealt with sex, boundaries, or consent. The same reason I couldn't tell anyone in church because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me and they would tell my parents. If silence is a predator's best friend, and if shame and denial are the ingredients that help this epidemic to grow, how can any of us still stay silent? When I finally got the courage to tell my story at different shelters, conferences, schools, I realized it wasn't enough because so many brown Pacific Islander girls and boys had the same story as me. The same Uncle Moikokolo, incest, and never telling their story to their parents or any adults. Thank you to Alliance Strengthening Families for hearing about my work and asking me to come over to plan the first Poetry Slam, using this as a way for students in American Samoa to talk about domestic violence and sexual assault. My first work in American Samoa shocked me. This was literally the reason I changed how I would run workshops ever again. I used to go to schools, and we call this 3 things you say about yourselves. Students would take a piece of paper, write 3 things that no one knows about them in the room, and not write their name. The point of this game is for students to get to know each other and maybe have something in common that they didn't know. I collect the paper and put it in a box and read it out loud, and someone has to guess who they think it is. I usually get kids that would write, 1, I'm allergic to shellfish. 2, I can't swim. 3, I have 10 siblings. Now, I don't know if it's because some of the students follow my story or heard that I'm a survivor of domestic violence and sexual abuse, but I can still remember reading the first paper and saying, 1, I've been sexually abused by my grandfather. 2, I tried to commit suicide. 3, I do drugs. And this would go on and on and on. No one rose their hands to guess who it was because they probably forgot the part I said I would say it out loud. And instead, I changed the game for everyone to just listen and encourage the person with words. I explained to the classroom, anyone can say out loud, I love you, I pray for you, I understand, with no judgment, just so that person knows someone cares. A lot of our kids go to school with the same kids, in the same elementary, the same village, at the same church, and still don't know what's going on with someone sitting right next to them. How you and I react and speak to sexual abuse survivors can make a difference in whether we shut down or get help. If healing begins by telling, then we must make telling safe. Like I said before, if Samoa, just like American Samoa's population, is mainly youth, so wouldn't it make sense to train our youth to speak to youth about what's happening in their generation on empowerment, sexual abuse, domestic violence, drug abuse, and consent? This would forever change my workshop to making sure youth knew how to speak to their own peers. If the youth still didn't feel safe speaking to their parents, teachers, adults, they can at least be a friend. I did a survey with 300 students from ACC to high schools here. In American Samoa, only 30 of the 300 students didn't admit to anything. The 270 students either admitted being sexually abused, physically abused, suicide, going to juvenile detention, or having a drug addiction. Child abuse is linked to high risk of suicide. 80% of prisoners admitted to being sexually abused as a child. 70% of women that check into drug rehab admitted to being sexually abused as a child. In the last 3 years in Samoa, 84 people committed suicide between the ages of 12 to 35. In American Samoa, teens are nearly twice as likely to make a plan to commit suicide as their US counterparts. I founded my own organization, Brown Girl Woke, a nonprofit that aspires and educates and empowers young females and males using performance arts to speak about taboo issues in our community. Because I knew for many Pacific Islander families, church and culture meant a lot, I wanted to make an avenue to go into church and use culture to speak about these taboo issues. And performance arts was that segue. Why? Because performance arts and dance and church plays always made sure culture, tradition, and religious views stayed intact. Why not use it to promote awareness for sexual abuse, social justice issues, and it worked. I knew it was still hard for a lot of victims to call out their predator, especially when it's family or someone close in the community. I also knew the mask we would wear to hide from everyone. So I would go into the youth groups, schools, and organizations and do workshops on using song, dance, spoken word poetry, and skits that made them feel safe to express themselves, not feel they were only telling their story, but also telling everyone else's story. This was a way to share their story and feel safe, supported, and unmasking themselves without shame or blame. Thank you again to Alliance Families Organization on Sexual Abuse and Domestic Violence for making sure I could come to American Samoa to do these workshops, making sure youth know the organizations are out there and finding support. Our Poetry Slam in American Samoa has made a huge impact on the youth in American Samoa, making it safe for youth to talk about sexual abuse, domestic violence, drug abuse, government corruption, church corruption, suicide, depression. The kids had a lot to say. You might have even watched this on TV or on the radio. It takes a village to raise a child, and we need everyone to make sure they are safe. I know this is an uncomfortable conversation, but any real change with village, culture, and people deal with uncomfortable conversations. Thank you.